It boggles my mind how it develops on a monthly basis at the moment. I have the largest battery storage capacity, certainly in Europe to the best of my knowledge, but it's still nowhere near enough.
Surely you can't resolve all challenges at once. Which battle are we going to pick and let's win that? I think an obvious challenge renewable energy faces versus nuclear is that stability of that power. The potential challenge with this is public perception of nuclear. I mean, ultimately, these plants are probably some of the safest run sites in the world, right? And people will take their mind to the well-publicised catastrophes in the past. If I was younger and not heavily involved in recruitment, I'd be eagerly wanting to work in all our sectors, without a doubt.
I think for renewables, there's quicker entry to market for some of the renewable energy technologies rather than nuclear, for example.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Like a large solar asset or battery storage asset can take 6 months, might be a bit ambitious, 6, 12, 18 months to go from breaking ground to fully operational energy generating assets. Whereas for you, I mean, I'm not a nuclear expert, but I don't know how long SMRs take to build or to start generating energy.
Well, yeah, you're looking at 2 years easily of construction phase before they get to operational.
But yeah, that's where I'm at with renewable energy tech. It could be a lot quicker to install, to become operational, and thus have the benefit of the electricity generation to feed these large data centers. Also, I think anaerobic digestion has got a place for it as well, with the biomethane strategy in the UK, moving into Ireland as well, because I know Ireland are looking to build more data centres and they've got a biomethane strategy.
Yeah.
So they can generate renewable gas and renewable electricity, of course, and also they're not necessarily huge assets, but it just depends upon the feedstock that is going to be feeding these plants to generate the electricity and where that's going to come from. And that could just be on the side of these large data centers immediately feeding the energy into them, for example.
I think an obvious challenge renewable energy faces versus nuclear is that stability of that power.
Yeah,
high capacity power, stable over a long period of time. And I think nuclear is an obvious answer for that. I think the government have made no secret recently about kind of streamlining the planning process for SMRs, which is going to make it easier to get these things to the construction phase. And they are being geared up to power data centers. So we're seeing real traction in that. A lot of the technology is coming from the US into the UK, but we have got some UK developers, Rolls-Royce SMR, Holtec Britain being part of that as well. So there's definitely more of a focus, but again, we're still quite away from that. So again, I think timelines, how quickly do the government want these AI growth zones to be up and running? Because the challenge is SMR is a little bit behind at the moment versus renewable energy.
Do you think renewable energy tech could plug the gap whilst the SMRs and the nuclear energy comes to the forefront?
Could be. You've also got an existing fleet of nuclear sites in the UK that are active and generating power. Are they enhanced enough to deliver this? Maybe not. You've also got the development of Hinkley Point C, Sizewell C, where they're hopefully going to be breaking ground soon properly. But they're years and years away.
Yeah.
So SMR is the next thing nuclear-wise that we're going to get operational in the UK. But I think the bigger question is the grid capacity and being able to take this power demands.
Completely agree.
So, from a grid perspective, what does that look like? Again, I'm not sure we know the answer to that yet.
I think that's why battery storage is so important, all the BESS systems. And again, the government targets are to increase, to the best of my knowledge, from 4.4 gigawatts capacity at the moment in the UK to circa 20 gigawatts.
Yeah.
And solar's due to expand really drastically as well. So the electricity generated from the solar assets can be stored in the batteries to then help with grid capacity and to feed the electricity for these AI centres and the like, data centres. But yeah, look, I think you're dead right. In the Irish market as well, I know that there's a little bit of a standoff between some developers and the grid. I think the grid are waiting a little bit for the developers to decide where they want to go.
Yeah.
Likewise, the developers are waiting for the grid people to put the injection points in. So there's a little bit of a standoff there. I'm expecting some news on that soon and some progression. But that being said, we're still on a bit of a standoff.
Yeah.
So How future proof is it? I don't think we know the capacity that we need to get to, because AI, as you said, is still very, very much an emerging thing. How much power is going to be needed to feed the system? And by the system, it's anything and everything to do with this AI development. I mean, it boggles my mind how it develops on a monthly basis at the moment.
Yeah, I think you've got multiple challenges that are trying to be resolved, and ultimately it's which one is most important. You know, energy security is something that we want as a country. You've got the 2030 targets that have been brought forward under this current government, and now we've got this AI goal as well, and how that's going to be powered. It's like you can't resolve all challenges at once. So you know, which battle are we going to pick, and let's win that. Because, you know, the challenge we've already discussed around grid capacity, where's this power? We're talking about SMR power, and we haven't got an SMR built yet in the country. You know, how far is that going to be?
That's a good point, yeah.
You know,
we've not got loads of battery. I think we're one of the biggest battery storage have the largest battery storage capacity, certainly in Europe, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah. But it's still nowhere near enough. But you're right. Like, if SMR is going to come down the line in years and years to come, we are a little bit behind the curve already.
I mean, as it happens, I think, you know, speaking to some businesses in the UK which are certainly at more advanced, and there's a developer of a micro reactor that's certainly gaining traction in Wales, and that might be the first site we see come to life. That's been widely publicised in the news. But could there be other developers? You know, who knows? So I think it is gaining traction, but this isn't like an overnight fix. And so I think we need to understand the timelines. What is the battle we're going to pick, and how we're going to win it, and what is the capacity challenge that we need, or target, that we need to reach. What it does, Tammy, though, is it's certainly going to drive opportunity, which for us as recruiters is obviously music to our ears, and certainly for apprentices and people wanting to get into the renewable nuclear sectors, you know, all of these objectives is going to drive opportunity.
Absolutely, I think. And your problem, which you'll probably speak to in a second, is the ageing workforce, perhaps.
Yeah.
In the nuclear market, I think for me in the renewables side of things, as with nuclear, of course, there's a finite amount of people that have done the jobs that needs doing. So it's all about transferable skills and apprenticeships and trainees, and the more junior members of our working community need to be upskilled and encouraged to come into the green revolution and come into this green skills side of our workforce. But there's a finite supply of them. So we need to make sure that, and I hear you do it, Dan, and I certainly do it as well, is educate people within the market around the realistic expectation of what people's budgets can afford. I think people's skill and experience level, supply and demand, is forcing a bit of a warp in salaries. People are being paid a lot more to be kept with their employer because they're a fear of losing them, which is warping the market, and it's causing a few issues. But if we encourage those to join the sector with transferable experience, and the clients that we work with that are doing that, in our side of things, we're seeing massive success, I must say.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to development of SMR technology, something you have to go through is go through the ONR and regulatory policy, and make sure that ultimately everything is in place for these plants to be operational and run safely. That's the key, right? So there's quite a lengthy process you have to go through before you can get the various approval. And actually part of that is actually recruitment and the people that you're going to employ to run these sites. They have to have the right level of experience. They have to be capable people, because ultimately we want to avoid a nuclear catastrophe in the country. So it's really important that you're bringing in the right people to run these plants. The training's there, the qualifications are there, and they tick the boxes when it comes to vetting. So there's certainly a proper process you have to go through for these, which again takes time. Once more of these get off the ground, I think that probably eases that, and there's a bit more confidence in it. But that again plays into another aspect of why a potential challenge with this is public perception of nuclear. I think there's still quite a bit of work to do there, And whilst it's definitely kicking on, there is nervousness in the community about having a nuclear asset on their doorstep. So I think what a lot of these companies will be doing, and I've seen do, is, you know, public forums where people in the community can come and ask questions, find out more about it, what are the risks. I mean, ultimately, these plants are probably some of the safest run sites in the world, right?
That's the irony of it.
And that's the irony of it. And people will take their mind to the well-publicised catastrophes in the past, but we're so far on from that, and the safety and the governance around these plants is unbelievable. So I think the more we can talk about this in the community, the more the community has an option to come and see this, the better the public perception is going to be. But that will definitely stunt the growth potentially of some of this. So, and that's probably more of a factor in my world than it is in renewables.
Yes and no. I think many of the businesses we work really closely with have community liaison officers, and for example, in perhaps more prevalent in anaerobic digestion at the moment, again because of the perception in the community is that they smell, they're big. Some people say they're loud, but it's just the lorries unloading and more traffic and things. But I know that lots of anaerobic digestion plants go through planning application processes and the like, and then the communities will kick up a bit of a fuss, with right reason in their views, of course. But it will cause stunted growth of the sector potentially. But in my opinion, some of that is due to just a little bit of a lack of knowledge, because do I want a food waste processing facility that may have an odour control problem on my doorstep? Immediately you go, no. However, now that I'm more educated than one or two perhaps of the public in anaerobic digestion, the benefits, they don't really smell. There's odour control. They're massively, there's huge legislation from the EA and the government to adhere to certain protocol and regulation around smell and the like. So I think with a bit more education through community liaison, whether it's the build of an anaerobic digestion facility or that wind turbines are ugly, that solar farms across massive fields is a poor use of space, I would argue the opposite for all of them. We're in a relative energy crisis, and I think to develop assets to generate clean, genuinely renewable energy is going to be key to the country's energy goals, to provide energy for these AI and data centres, and also to plug the gap, as I mentioned earlier, before some of these larger nuclear facilities and things that can come online. So I think a mixture of the two technologies and other means, of course, it's not just nuclear and renewable energy, is it? Yeah, there's huge goals to reach. The workforce needs to get bigger. There's lots of challenges around that, which perhaps we'll cover another day. But yeah, in conclusion, I think we need to keep an eye on technological advances, government legislation, policy, a really targeted approach to what we're trying to achieve, how we're going to achieve it, and having milestones in place moving 100%. Forward. You know, I think that's where we need to get to as a nation. And we've touched on perception a couple of times, and it's really educating everybody that needs to know about it.
I think just to add to what you've said, completely agree on all of that. I think having goals and targets in place that we're reaching is really important, but I think speed as well, speed of decision making, because these goals aren't, you know, being pushed back at all, and they're coming ever closer, and before you know it'll be at 2030. So it's really important that we're quick in our decision making, and you know we're earmarking tech providers that we believe in that are going to come in here and develop and generate this power for us. And again, I mentioned it earlier, pick our battle. What's the most important battle that we want to pick as a nation? And that's the one we need to go for. And whether that's made up of SMR and nuclear technology or renewable technology, we just need to make that decision. And I think when it comes to a talent perspective, I think there needs to be more focus, even at school, university level, about putting a spotlight on these sectors, because really that's really important for the growth of these markets. And the success of achieving these goals is having the people that are going to create, engineer, construct and commission and ultimately operate these sites as well. So education at school level, real focus on apprenticeship, making these markets sexy and attractive for people to come into, because
absolutely.
I think ultimately there is that nervousness around maybe getting into nuclear, probably maybe so much in renewable energy. So I think the more we can do there, that's only going to help aid this. But yeah, some really exciting times ahead. And certainly if I was, younger and not heavily involved in recruitment, I'd be eagerly wanting to work in one of our sectors, without a doubt.
Yeah, I'd agree.